Hey everybody!
It's Alexa and Mackie, and today we are doing part 1 of the set of what we read videos. I have a lot of leftover books from last December that I still need to talk about and want to talk about, so we're just gonna take the liberty of doing 2 in a row and hope you guys don't mind. So I'm gonna kick things off by talking about some of the books I read last year. So the first book I want to talk about is Fame, Fate, and the First Kiss. This is by Casey West, and it is another one of her young adult romantic comedies. This one in particular sounds straight out of a Disney Channel original movie. Main character Lacey has always wanted to be an actress, and she finally gets her opportunity when she is cast as the star of an indie zombie book adaptation. Lacey is trying to figure out how she feels about being on set for the first time, like a professional set, and she's also trying to navigate being part of Hollywood gossip now because her co-star is actually someone who's really famous for being in a franchise. And she's also trying to keep up with her high school curriculum, which, because she's having trouble doing so, her dad hires a tutor for her. And there's a mystery on set when things start going wrong around Lacey, and there's also a budding romance in it, and it is really cute. That's always what I expect from a Casey West book, just to be delighted and feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside, and that is exactly what you get with this book.
Cool. So
much fun. Lacey's such a great character. The other characters, both the secondary ones and the love interest Donovan, are pretty great to read about. So if you're looking for something fluffy and fun, then definitely check that one out. The next book I need to talk about is also a young adult contemporary, and this one is Famous in a Small Town by Emma Mills. This book is essentially about a group of friends and one summer in their lives. There are a couple of things that go on during that summer. First is they are trying to fundraise in order to get the marching band to the Rose Parade. They're also just hanging out and spending time together the way teenagers do. But there is also a new boy who shows up in town and sort of starts becoming part of their friend group. And it's fun to see how all of these characters interact. I think Emma Mills still successfully manages to write characters that are interesting and fun. But in terms of plot, this is probably the book I find the weakest of all 4 that she has out. There was just no major draw for me personally, and I also feel like there was some unnecessary stuff thrown in there. It just was not what I wanted it to be, and I wanted to love it so much, but I didn't. The next thing I have to show you is not actually a novel. It is a collection of poems and short stories, and it's Fierce Fairy Tales, Poems and Stories to Stir Your Soul by Nikita Hill. Confession, the reason I bought this is because the cover was so great. But I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. It is essentially Nikita Hill taking fairy tale tropes and fairy tale characters and familiar things you'll recognize from fairy tales and putting a feminist modern spin to them. And I think the way she does this, the way she combines the imagery with the theme, is really interesting. It is a little bit heavy-handed, but it is really interesting, and I personally, as someone who loves fairy tales and fairy tale imagery, really enjoyed seeing all of the nods and references in this one. So I would recommend checking it out. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the last volume in a manga series. I finally finished reading Your Name. This is volume 3. It's by Makoto Shinkai. I have said that multiple times. You guys pretty much probably know what it's about, but in case you don't, Your Name is the story of these 2 individuals who every time they go to sleep, they feel like they're living another person's life, and they actually are. And so they try to figure out how they're connected, why they're connected, and it just cascades into this whole series of events. It's just as beautiful as the film. I obviously knew what was going to happen in this volume, and it has a lot of my favorite moments in the film, and I think just being able to look at these scenes the way they were drawn and illustrated with all the details and everything, it was just nice, and I could take my time with it too. Definitely check out the movie if you have not. Please, we have said it multiple times, but please do. It's so great. I also read another manga, and I'm also very happy about this one. It's Love is Hard for Otaku by Fujita, and this is the first volume. I've actually seen the anime, and most of what happens in the anime is the same as what happens in this particular volume. You get to meet the 4 main characters who all happen to be regular office workers in Japan by day, and then after the workday, they actually come out as otaku of all sorts. It's just fun seeing these characters who remind me a lot of myself, although I'm much more obvious about my fandom. It's such a delight to just revisit these characters, and just like the Your Name manga, it's also nice to be able to take my time and to notice little details. They also do a really good job of explaining different references in this one. They have little notes oh, this is the anime, or oh, this is what they're referring to, or oh, this is what this term means, which is really helpful and really fun, and I personally really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to reading the next 2 volumes. And then we have a book that was a disappointment. I hate it when a book that I really wanted to love is not a book I love, and that book in question is One Day in December by Josie Silver. This book is something I bought because of Instagram. I kept seeing it everywhere and the story just sounded so interesting. Lori is on a bus, and while she's riding this bus, they pass a bus stop and the bus comes to a stop, and there's this boy sitting at the bus stop, and their eyes meet, they share a moment, and then the bus drives away and she never gets to see this boy again. And she basically obsesses over finding him for an entire year, only to find out that he has actually been dating her best friend slash roommate. And so begins 10 years of very complicated relationships.
10 years!
And as someone who always finds gray characters and situations very interesting, that part of it was very appealing to read. Like, it kept me going because I was like, what's gonna happen next? What possible drama could happen after that? I will say that I think one of the reasons I don't love it as much as other people do is probably because I'm not as big a fan of the love interest, so I wasn't really rooting for them. But if you're interested in something that sort of studies a relationship at different time periods in people's lives, then maybe this will interest you. If you like the book One Day by David Nichols, or if you like Something Barred and Something Blue by Emily Giffin, you might like this more than I did. I mean, I loved Something Barred and Something Blue, but this book was just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. So the next book I want to talk about is An Assassin's Guide to Love and Treason by Virginia Boker. This is historical fiction, and it follows two characters. First is Catherine, or Kit, as she becomes known in the book. She disguises herself as a boy because she wants to go to London and fulfill her father's role in the Catholic rebels' plan to assassinate the Queen.
Yikes.
And then there's Toby, who works for the Crown, not that he has a choice, and he is trying to ferret out who the Catholic rebels are. And their paths cross because they both get involved in Shakespeare's production of Twelfth Night. And this whole mistaken identities and like a girl disguised as a boy, all of these themes actually play in with the whole 12th Night thing really well. I enjoyed it. I thought it was surprisingly readable. I was worrying that since it's historical fiction, it would be a little harder for me to get into, but it wasn't, and that's great. The one thing that prevented me from really loving it is the fact that I wasn't really super invested in either of the main characters, and that's always been important to me. I thought that it was interesting enough in terms of plot for me to keep on going up until the very end, but because I wasn't really invested in them, I didn't really worry for them overly much. I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, they're gonna find a way out of this. And if you want to find out if they do, you're gonna have to read the book. It was mostly enjoyable, and I am glad I got to read it before the end of the year last year. There is a book that I read last year that I wanted to love more than I did, and that book is Circle of Shadows by Evelyn Skye. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy, and it's set in a world where there are taigas, who are sort of like ninjas, and they are tasked to protect their empress. Sora and Damon, who are two of the taigas in training, discover that there is a plot to assassinate the empress and have someone take over the throne. So they are trying their best to prevent that from happening, but also warn everyone else that this is going on. It is a fairly typical YA fantasy plot, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but the thing is, like the last book I talked about, it just was hard because I wasn't invested in either of the main characters again. I didn't really particularly care too much about what was going to happen to either of them, and that's always such a difficult thing. I was rather less than impressed with this book, which is very sad to me because I really wanted to love it because it sounded like it was going to be like the kind of book that you read that almost reads like an anime. I was disappointed in this one.
I figured I'd kick off my new year with actually getting to my review pile. So somebody had emailed us, an author named Gregory Finaro, and he asked if we could review on the vlog or the blog.
Or both.
Or both. A book called Watch Hollow. It is coming out on February 12th. It's middle grade, so it obviously is in kind of my wheelhouse. It's a story about two kids, Oliver and Lucy Tinker, whose dad is a clock fixing person. I don't even know what they're called.
Clockwork mechanic.
Clockwork mechanic. Yes. Point is, he fixes clocks. They're reeling from the financial and emotional loss of their mom, who had just recently passed from cancer, and their dad's business is going down until they get a mysterious offer to fix the giant clock sitting in yonder mansion isolated near some woods.
Of course, there's an isolated
There's also an isolated mansion near some woods for a tidy sum that will, you know, fix their line of credit and make everything good. So right from the get-go, it was very, very sort of interesting when you sort of uncover kind of the mystery and the magic and the evil and the good that's sort of in and around that clock, and the kind of whimsical characters. It absolutely feels like one of those kind of classic fairy tale specials that they used to show on TV where something magical comes alive in the middle of anything, and at the center of this is you got two kids who are just trying to do right by each other and with their dad. And I would classify it as that. It's one of those modern fairy tale types. It's not my like most favorite book in the world, like just blew my mind, oh my god, it's like life-changing. But it's actually a pretty nice find. It's a gem. If anybody who wants to curate a decent library for kids, I would recommend Librarians. Pick it up. It's a great read. It's a great summer read because that's exactly what of course it happens in the summer. And there's always a fight between good and evil, and at the center a couple of plucky kids who just want to do right. I don't know, they felt plucky to me, Lucy and Oliver, who, I mean, they weren't the typical siblings that kind of fought over stuff. They actually, you know, they cared for each other, and that was nice. And so I would recommend it to anybody who does have a library, wants to create a library, wants to buy something for somebody younger, or just wants to check out a new kind of fresh middle grade read. A lot of it is actually very, very, very simple. Like I said, you just, you know, unwind and let it unfold, and you'll breeze through it.
Unwind, because it's a clock.
Ha ha ha. Pun most definitely intended.
The next book I'm going to talk about is one that I buddy read with Kristen from Super Space Chick. It's a book called 100 Summers by Beatrice Williams. I've been interested in reading that author for a while because of my friends Hannah from So Obsessed With and Kelly from Belle of the Literati. They did this whole event around this author because they love her book so much, and so I felt highly encouraged to try one of hers, and so did Kristen, and so we read this one together. Cool. 100 Summers centers around a main character named Lily. Also involved in this story are two characters that have important relationships with Lily. So first is Budgie, who is her former best friend. This best friend of hers is now married to her former paramour, Nick. This story basically explores how we got to that point. It alternates timelines between the past and the current situation, and you sort of have to keep reading in order to find out everything that's actually going on in this story. Whenever I talked to Kristen about this one, I was like, it reminds me so much of Gossip Girl. It's just like all the drama, the relationship drama, the family drama, the crazy things that happen in this story. And it was enjoyable. It was so easy to get into and so easy to devour because the pacing is just like chop, chop, chop. Like it just keeps on going. So that was a really quick and interesting read. The next book I need to talk about I can actually show you. A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and this is by Bridget Kemmerer, and this is essentially a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's actually one of the most unique ones I read, and it's because the main character, who is the Belle character, is actually from modern day Washington, D.C. Harper is basically taken from modern day D.C. into the world of Emberfall, where she is supposed to encounter the cursed prince and help him break the curse. Speaking of the prince, his name is Ren, and he is the heir to Emberfall, and he has been cursed to live his 18th year over and over and over again, and obviously also turn into a beast. So the two of them are an interesting mix to watch because Harper's sensibilities are so modern that they really are almost in direct opposition to how Emberfall is in terms of culture and society. It's very fascinating just to see how Harper has like an explosive impact on the kingdom of Emberfall and on the people in Emberfall, including Prince Ren. And it's fun to watch it play out. I also really enjoyed how Bridget Kemmerer integrated all of like the familiar like Beauty and the Beast tells. I will say that for me, it builds up steadily, but it also feels like that big climactic moment happens so quickly that it's like it's over before you're just like, but we just got there and now we left. And I also will say that even though I love Harper and I love Ren, my favorite character is actually a secondary character named Gray. This is unsurprising though, because the minute you encounter Gray, you find out that he's basically like the captain of the guard in this story. So I have a type. We all know this. Anyway, if you're looking for a Beauty and the Beast retelling that's refreshing, that's a little different from anything else you read, then you will definitely want to check out A Curse So Dark and Lonely. The next book I'm going to talk about is another like ebook that I read, and it's Making Up by Lucy Parker. It's the third in her London Celebrities series, and in this case it follows a aerial performer named Trix and a makeup artist named Leo. So Trix is trying to find her self-confidence again after being in a long-term emotionally abusive relationship, and Leo on the other hand is trying to repair his reputation after this big sort of mishap happens on the set of a movie he was working on. And the two of them actually know each other from the past, and they do not like each other. Like, they're very antagonistic towards each other. So apart from their own individual like problems that they're dealing with, they're also trying to like make sense of each other because they have to work together now. This is a hate to love romance. It's such a delight. Lucy Parker's books are so easy to get into. They're so quick to read because they're not that long. She does a really great job with her characters in making them likable and relatable, and you will be rooting for them. So I binged that book in like an afternoon and it was great, and I would highly recommend it. The next book is also one that I accidentally ended up buddy reading with Kristen. We read The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This also follows two characters. There is a prince named Ali who is training to basically be sort of the commander and protector of his brother who is the future leader. It's rough for him because he's trying to make sense of how his beliefs play a part in his political position. They're almost in direct opposition with each other sometimes, and that's a struggle that he is dealing with throughout the course of the book. There is another character named Nari who is basically a thief and a con artist, and that's how she's been surviving all her life. And then one day she accidentally summons a jinn, and she ends up being taken to the city of Daevabad, which is where Ali is from, because of things. It was interesting seeing these two plot lines play out together. At first, I was actually fonder of Nari's story because I love journey stories, and that part is more interesting to me. But then I started getting more fond of Ali's story because even though I'm not much for court intrigue or political maneuverings in a book, for some reason I just thought it was so interesting just seeing him struggle with this, because it's such a human struggle to like have the societal beliefs thrust in your face, but also like have your own personal beliefs making you rethink everything you're doing and saying or what you're trying to achieve. So fascinating. And so eventually their paths cross and things get rather heated. It was actually a surprisingly good and surprisingly engaging fantasy read. I was really nervous about it because it was a little intimidating in my mind. I was just like, I was really afraid that it would take me so long to get into it, but it was not the case. The plot was just enough to take me through the entire story, and the way it ends is enough for me to be like, but you can't end there. Thankfully,
and yet they did.
Thankfully, it is a trilogy. The second book is out this month. So I have alluded to the fact before that my friends DJ, whose Instagram handle is Life in Fiction, and he also has a blog now, and Rachel from Helicelli and Kristen, we're sort of doing an unofficial like paranormal book club where we read like older YA paranormal books. And so the first one we did this year was The Iron King by Julie Kagawa. It's the first in the Iron Fae series. It's about a girl named Megan, and her life is turned upside down when she discovers that her brother has been switched with a changeling.
Oh no.
And so she has to go into the land of, like, into the
fairy.
Never Never, that's what they call the fairyland in this book, in order to rescue him. That's like the bare bones of the story, but there's so much more involved because Megan discovers she has a connection to the Fae world that she did not know she had. What I liked about this book is that it surprised me because it went in a direction that I didn't think it was going to go, and I was like, oh. I mean, I thought it was going to do one thing and it didn't, and that was very fascinating. And I really like learning about the Never Never and like all the different fairies and courts in there.
Yes.
That was really cool. I will say that the one thing about this one is that it's kind of its time. If you've read anything that was sort of published around this time, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, like there's a certain way that they were written.
Like the Beautiful Creatures era.
Yeah, something like that. So that was one thing that bothered me. The other thing was I also feel like I didn't get to know the characters well enough. I knew them in the sense of maybe had talked for like 5 minutes at a party, but I didn't really know them, so I wasn't super invested in a lot of the things. I will say my two favorite characters are secondary characters. One of them is Puck, and the other one is Grim, and if you read the book, you would probably guess why I love them. But yeah, I actually think I'm going to be continuing the series because I am interested to see if my feelings towards Megan and Ash, who is the other character that has a lot of like page time in this book, get higher in my esteem. But yeah, overall it was enjoyable. It was a good first pick for us, and I'm glad I finally got to read it. The last book that I'm going to mention in this video is another Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's called The Beast's Heart by Leif Shallcross. This book is a retelling of the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, but it's told from the perspective of the Beast. Which, to me, is interesting because I don't think I've ever read a book where it was just the perspective of the Beast. And so it plays out pretty much with the same elements as the typical Beauty and the Beast story. It took me a while, but then eventually I was like really interested in seeing like how the Beast would think and like how he was feeling. And it was such a fun thing to explore. The problem was like I realized because it's just basically the fairy tale just told from the other side of it that I was kind of just like not... Like I knew what was gonna happen essentially, so in my mind I was like, okay, fine. It was okay. That's pretty much all I gotta say. If you want more Beauty and the Beast retellings or Beauty and the Beast inspired stories, then you might want to pick it up.
Alrighty, and so we end this segment with the Marvel Unlimited segment. Yes, this is our Marvel Unlimited moment. Yeah, we're christening that for 2019, where we read comics like it was 6 months ago. That's right. It's roughly about the same amount as an Amazon Prime subscription, but instead of, you know, like buying stuff, it's every single Marvel comic printed from 6 months ago backwards. So for this particular segment, as we end part one, I kind of just really focus on my 4 favorite X titles to date. It is still X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, X-Men Red, and X23 because all new Wolverine is pretty much ended. So I'm gonna start with X-Men Blue, where our baby X-Men who are time distorted are gonna come head to head with Magneto after some crazy shenanigans around him trying to take revenge on people who were really messing up kind of the mutant community. Left over from I want to say some previous big arcs where the good guys were bad and the bad guys were good. A couple of folks went rogue, but one of them went rogue on purpose, which is Emma Frost. Not too happy, like the rest of the known universe, about how Emma had such a great arc and then suddenly her boyfriend dies and she's evil again. Not cool. But we're at that place where Magneto's now out for blood and the X-Men are just like, you know what? We're gonna try still to do the right thing. So always fun when Emma Frost is in the room. Not too happy where they're taking her, but that's X-Men Blue. X-Men Gold, where I'm reading it now, takes place after the famed Kitty Pryde and Colossus wedding aftermath. I know, they went there and boy, they did things. But after that entire event, which again, spoilers, focuses a little bit on Rachel. I kind of love how Rachel and Kurt and Kitty, all three of them, it's almost like Excalibur reborn, because they're really cool. It's an arc about Rachel sort of returning to her Hound persona with like the scars and the spikes and the whatever. So again, not too happy where that's going either, but I still love it. X-Men Red is a resurrected Jean Grey, free of the Phoenix, thanks to Hope Summers. She kicked the Phoenix away. Jean also kicked the Phoenix away too. It was kind of like a breakup. The resurrection of Jean Grey was basically started with her breaking up with the Phoenix, which is kind of sad because the Phoenix couldn't take it. I mean, they had a thing for so long. They were together, you know. Resurrections, and now it's like we gotta part ways. I kind of like how they finally revealed the big bad. Who is the big bad? Which, surprise, we don't already did that, semi-spoiler. And I like what Joss did then. We'll see how this works for this one. And finally X23, because all new Wolverine is done, focuses on Laura Kinney. Anybody who watched Logan, the little girl, grown up, 2 claws on each hand, 1 on each foot, super amazing, and how she's trying to right the wrongs of things. And she's basically starting out her own series. In tow is Gabby Kinney, the Honey Badger, her 9-year-old sister clone, and it is the greatest thing ever. I actually don't even remember the story. I just know that Honey Badger was cool in that one. So she's the only thing that I am reading this for, and she's super great. I mean, anybody that calls it Namor's Abslantis. And anyone that tries to incept Jean Grey with Cerebro, because Cerebro's under the ocean now and that's where all the mutants are hiding, and she's like, I want to make sure, and she says Cerebro like 8 billion times, and towards the end of the last panel of X-Men Red, Jean's like, we'll track you with Cerebro, and I'm just like, get me one! And so Honey Badger is now my favorite X-Men. Alrighty, that wraps up part 1. We are gonna give you guys part 2 next week. More books and stuff to come.
Well, if you guys have read any of the books in our video, we would love to hear what you thought. We would also like to know what you guys have been reading, because we're nosy like that. I'm nosy like that anyway.
Yes, we are.
And we hope you guys are doing well, and we will see you guys next week for another video. Bye!